Oh, great. How do we go with our morning tea? Round of applause if you enjoyed your morning tea. Thanks to EXO Recruitment. We like them. I'm just being careful of some of the... oh, good. I've got the bottle that belongs to EXO Recruitment. That's a good drink bottle that they're giving away at their stand. I like to go out and do the hard work for you, of course. Might need to reconnect the straw before you get fully into it. Just make sure that's connected. But it's a good see-through bottle, good insulation, free of any plastic nasties, and that's a fantastic bottle for you. Also, grab one of their cups. I haven't had a chance to preview this yet, but it's got good weight to it. Feels nice in glass. Good insulation, EXO Recruitment, they've done a great job. Also, should go and see the AWS stand. They're giving away some great nerdy stuff. This is a bamboo wireless fast charging hub. So if you've got a bamboo phone, this is what you want. It's one of these fast charging wireless hubs. Just whack the phone on there and you're good to go. All right, we're getting underway with our breakout session, if you like, the second session. Hopefully you are here for the right one. Innovation from the edges, that's what we're getting into. Before we do that though, I need to do a little icebreaker. This is part of the sort of agreement when I come to MCS. I need to do an icebreaker every time the teams get together in a new room. I'm not, as an audience member, I find icebreakers kind of awkward. So, I've tried to come up with ways to make it easier for you. So what I want you to do is on the count of three, you just turn to the person next to you, or to me. Don't have to, I know what it's like. I used to work in the computer industry. People are scary. And on the count of three, you're just going to yell out what you had at morning tea, all right? So we'll do one big bang, and it's sort of a Titanic icebreaker, this one. You know, we'll break the ice, but we may sink ourselves in the process. So on three, you're going to yell out what you had for morning tea. 1, 2, 3. Oh, bloody hell, sausage roll I heard. That's good. That's good. Well done. Big thank you to one of our gold sponsors, our digital and creative agency, Publica. We do thank them, the ones behind this year's Tech Summit logo, design, new look, new website, and the marketing. And we thank Publica. And they say no matter the project, from strategic marketing planning and brochure websites to campaign management and NetSuite integrations, if it involves strategy, creativity, or digital know-how, chances are Publica know how to do it. Their job is making things simple for you, for your business and your customers, whether you need a fresh brand identity maybe, custom-built digital solution, or ongoing marketing support. Publica. Write it down. If you don't have a pen, remember it. They'll make sure your big ideas turn into practical, high-performing results. If you don't believe me, check out the video.
So my bosses asked me to create a super professional video for Tech Summit. And they picked me, the 21-year-old intern. Bold choice. You might know me from great hits such as...
And over here we have the people that follow us but never shop with us.
But you probably know Publica better for things like Coast Guard, World Buskers Festival and the Word Festival. We're stoked to be supporting the Tech Summit and Canterbury Tech community. So if you see us, come say hey. We're probably the ones with the coffee and the big ideas. And yes, I will be taking TikTok requests.
Good on you, Publica. Yeah, give them a round of applause. All right. Innovation from the Edge is a founder's view using tech to solve a modern-day problem with Sasha and Melissa. And Sasha, is a fintech founder, social entrepreneur, systems thinker. She works to redesign how we do debt in Aotearoa and beyond. And through Money Sweet Spot, she helps people move through debt with dignity and believes the next generation of finance will be more inclusive, more human, and more effective if we're willing to build it. She will be joined by Melissa, strategic leader and systems thinker working at the intersection of health, tech, care, and digital transformation. At Dynamic Controls, she leads product engineering and marketing, helping shape medical mobility solutions that improve lives globally. She's also founder of HoldMine, a purpose-led digital platform supporting whānau to plan, share and navigate critical life information, especially during times of loss or change. Both great goals, great jobs and great people. Please give a warm welcome to Sasha Lockley and Melissa Davies.
Got a clicker.
Thank you. There's a clicker right there.
Lovely.
This one's Sasha.
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 Today we were joking when we were preparing for this talk that we are the double Ds. Today we're going to talk to you about debt and dying, but don't let that put you off. I stand here as an accidental entrepreneur. I never intended to stand here. I'm also not a technologist, but I really like a good story. So that's what I'm going to share with you today. The only part of this story that's written by AI is this dad joke. And at the end of this talk, you'll get the dad joke answer. So I want to take you back to the 14th of October, 2019, when I had my Matrix moment. I come from a little town called Stafford in the middle of the UK, and it's the sort of town where you get born in the village, you marry in the village. In my case, I married my mum's best friend's eldest son, the most arranged white marriage you could ever have in your life. And you get one job, and you hope by God that you don't lose it. So it came to a surprise when I was driving back from a choir rehearsal over the Auckland Harbour Bridge. And I was the COO of one of the largest finance companies in New Zealand. And in that job, I heard terrible stories of debt. And I used to get incredibly upset. But my Nora Batty internal voice, for those of you who are British, you know who the heck I'm talking about. She's a very attractive, negative lady. My Nora Batty internal voice said, "How effing dare you think that you can in any way empathise with the stories of these customers, the stories of debilitating debt, of financial hardship, because on the face of it, you are a middle-class white woman from privilege. How dare you?" And I'm driving over the Harbour Bridge, and I have this thing called the Matrix moment, and it makes me sound absolutely crazy, but it's true. A little bit like pictures of nodes. We've got some people that do know technology in here, you know, the little circles, and it's all an ecosystem that's all connected. What I realised in that moment was the reason that I cared so deeply about this problem, the reason why I cried at work around the stories of our customers, was because those stories are actually my own family. So I am white. I do come from potential privilege, I guess you would say. But when I was growing up, one of my first memories was hiding behind the sofa away from a debt collector. My dad was a bit entrepreneurial, and he was a bus driver, and he thought he could do bus driving better than anybody else in Stafford. So he bought an old Leyland bus and decided to start his own business. When my granddad died, a dairy farmer, what did my dad need to do? Milk the cows? So unfortunately, my dad's business failed. I would say that my dad never recovered from that moment. My dad lives in a council flat in a little village called Eccleshall. He doesn't have curtains on his windows. I think that was a defining moment in his life. We were hiding from the debt collectors. And then if we fast forward a few years, my mum is an incredibly strong wahine. She encouraged me to come to New Zealand 20 years ago, even though it actually broke her heart. But she died an alcoholic at 58. So debt affected my family, and so did addiction. And then in 2008, I was working for law enforcement. I might not look like it, but I am an accountant. A forensic accountant, in fact, so apparently I quite like detail. Don't tell my team that. And I had a complete nervous breakdown. I had a 2-year-old at the time, and I thought that this world would genuinely be better off if I wasn't in it. I was really lucky that at that time I had support. I was able to move through that moment and not be defined by it. So I didn't start a business because I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I didn't want to be a unicorn. I don't want to be a billionaire, all of those things. But I was really pissed off. I was really pissed off. Excuse me, I don't know whether I'm meant to swear. Oops. I was really pissed off that debt can be defining in somebody's life. And I wondered whether we could create a different financial system where people can move through with dignity, increase their level of education, and feel seen and heard. And that's where Money Sweet Spot was formed. So my message here is that your story can hold you back or propel you forward. My mum passed away before I started Money Sweet Spot, and in some ways it's a really good job because she would have been really angry that I was leaving an exec role that was paying more money than my family had ever seen in many generations. So when I started Money Sweet Spot, I had to think quite carefully around the principles, the foundations of what it would look like. Who's in debt? Most of us. Some people are ashamed to put the hand up there, but actually most of us do have debt, but nobody ever talks about it, right? So when you're thinking about reframing debt, we need to be vulnerable and we need to share our stories and create a place filled with empathy. So when I started Money Sweet Spot, I'm a singer, so Hamilton the musical, anybody know that? Yes, thank you, one person at the back. Thank you. If you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything, and that has rung true for Money Sweet Spot. When I had the idea to start a new finance company, somebody offered me money. Somebody from the existing financial system wanted to invest in Money Sweet Spot. As a startup founder with no money, pretty difficult to turn down that money. But I knew that if I took it, the direction of Money Sweet Spot would be forever moved, 6 degrees to the right and 6 degrees too much for me. And that leads me on to the second piece. You can't change the game if you keep playing by the same rules. So at Sweet Spot, we've got some really strange principles. I think it's really stupid in this financial system that when people can't pay debt, we charge people default interest. Seems a bit stupid, doesn't it? And then if people have no money, what we do is we chase people for the money they don't have. Stupid, right? Very stupid. So in Money Sweet Spot, we decided to not charge those things. Has that caused a problem? Yes, because those things are a great revenue earner. But actually, as a social entrepreneur, it's my job to try things and fail sometimes, and fail we have. It's been the hardest journey of my life. If I knew what I know now back then, I'm not convinced I'd do it, in all honesty. So my question to you is, what rules would you break to do the right thing? I've been reading the Mel Robbins book, Let Them, and in there she says, we all can have an opportunity to solve a problem that really annoys us. And if we don't, then stop moaning about it. So I've decided to keep going, even though this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And finally, head, heart, and soul. So in building Money Sweet Spot, it is about numbers, isn't it? Debt. But actually, fundamentally, it's about stories. And risk is the failure of imagination. So in the context of Money Sweet Spot, we help people with the highest level of debt, with the lowest credit scores, that may have faced really difficult circumstances. And most people don't want to help those people. They want to avoid them like the plague. But at Sweet Spot, we've tried to imagine what it could look like to support those people. So if we imagine what that looks like, we value their individual stories. We acknowledge that people are good and bad things can happen to any of us. And for the financial system to judge us for what life inherently is, which is unpredictable, is completely mad. So when we're thinking about innovation in my context, we have to think about what we're building and who we're building for. And it can be really tempting as an entrepreneur to go where the easy problems are to solve. That would be serving the people that are already well served, that I know are going to pay me back. But we have to choose to do things differently. So in the last 3 years, we've helped 7,000 families to access free financial education. And we've helped 740 families to reset $70 million worth of high-cost debt. And in that journey out of debt, people have owned their first homes when they never even imagined it could be possible. And through our journey, they've learned more about money and got more money off their loans so that they're out of debt faster. But you can imagine that raising capital in that context is really difficult because I'm standing by my principles. The pitch for Money Sweet Spot went a little bit like this. I'm going to reframe debt. I'm going to lend to people that are more likely to not repay. I'm going to lose the customers because I don't think we should keep them in debt. No, I don't have a product roadmap because I just want to do one thing and I want to do it really well. And I'd like to give some money away if they do financial education. Would you give me money? So the idea was in October 2019 and we didn't launch till December 2022. So one of the principles I've stood by is that I've taken money from the right places and we have impact investors that are supportive of the long game and having that dual impact investment and social and financial return. But really in this context, I've picked all of the hards. I'm helping people that are perceived to be harder to help in an industry that really hates innovation, that nobody talks about the revenue that we earn from people not repaying debt. In an economic environment where unemployment is going up, inflation has been going up, we picked all of the hards, and I still wouldn't change it. So finally from me, you get the answer to the dad joke. Anybody Anybody got an answer what this will be? What do you get when you build a business with just your head? A very efficient, scalable system that nobody wants to use. I know, it was terrible, wasn't it? So my encouragement to you is, in innovation, wherever that is in your life, bring the people back to the heart of the systems that you operate within. Lead with heart, lead with empathy, and don't be distracted by people that don't believe in your cause. I've had to learn the hard way that sometimes I've listened to people because of my own internal narrative that I need a middle-aged white man, actually, from banking to be believable. And what I've learned over the past 4 years, that simply isn't true. Thank you. Ooh.
I would like to start with a question. What is the hardest conversation you've ever avoided having? For most people, it's about death, money, or family, and often it can be all three at once. For some, it's telling someone they haven't met expectations. And I'm going to share a bit more about both of these and why you need to have these hard conversations. We avoid them because they're uncomfortable, but nothing compares to when life takes the choice away. And 10 years ago, it did that for me. 10 years ago, my beloved dad, aged 55, died suddenly. And I was absolutely heartbroken. I wanted to focus on love and legacy. But I was drowning in admin. There was a mountain of paperwork, and I just couldn't see my way through it. I was the executor of my dad's estate, but I didn't know that. And we had talked about everything. We were really close. We talked about everything apart from his final wishes. He had a will, but it wasn't up to date. And that's really tough territory to navigate. So my story is personal, but it's not unique. And actually, 1 in 2 New Zealanders do not have a will, leaving families with stress, confusion, and arguments on top of the worst grief. And so that's why I knew this wasn't just about me. It was a problem worth building a solution for. That was the driver for me to create my startup, Hold Mine. I wanted to make it easier for everybody else when they had to deal with the unavoidable. Like Sasha, I also knew the problem I wanted to solve, and I knew the principles I wanted to hold on to. I knew that good business didn't happen by default, it happened by design. And by good, I mean ones that operate the way the founders hoped they would and have the impact that they envisioned. I was clear on those founding principles. It had to balance impact and purpose with being for profit, so the business model had to add up. It had to be impactful and useful, so cue a ton of hands-on and desktop research. It needed to be app first and be usable daily without adding any more stress. Users had to trust it, so security was critical from day one, and users had to have data sovereignty, so ensuring I could deliver that was crucial to the design at every stage. And I wanted it to be made here in Aotearoa. And then there were the practical questions around the business itself. Funding, should I have a co-founder? What's the structure? So while I was wondering that, this tired trope was being played. The homogenous story about startups. You know, the Valley formula, you've got to be young, you've got to be male, and you have to be technical. Race fast, and then have a bloody big party when you dilute down. None of that sits well with me. It's a homogenous story, it's a narrow story, and it's actually not true. Ali Tamasev did a ton of research in his book, Super Founders, and it shows the real picture. Solo founders are actually common. Non-technical leaders do succeed. Accelerators aren't magic, and most unicorns actually start in crowded markets. So the principles I held to, I flipped that script then. Non-technical, solo, and I bootstrapped. I decided to give myself a board of advisors, people who I could learn from, the ones that had also rewritten the rules. My dad was one, Dame Anita Roddick another, and Sir Richard Branson the third. And I knew that starting out playing against the rules would be hard, but I just didn't realise quite how hard. And we know hindsight is 2020. It's easy now to look back and see that launching Hold Mine in 2020, not my best move. Nearly dying in 2022, also not helpful, but I'm going to come to that. The principles, though, they were the easy part. Like, they come from deep values that I could hold on to when things got really tough. And it was the shift from the design, these principles, this vision, into the build where things got really messy. So once the build was underway, those bills started coming in and lockdowns kept hitting. I had to face it, one of my principles just wasn't holding. And it was this one, made in Aotearoa, made in New Zealand. And I stuck with it too long. 3 dev teams later, the reality was clear. The first team just failed to deliver. I had to bring in another tech crew to audit their work before moving on. The second team looked really promising, but they chased down way too much business, delivery slipped, and they eventually shut down. The third team were great, but they didn't code and React, and I needed a cross-platform solution. That first team was also my first really hard conversation as a founder. Delivery was slipping, no end in sight, and as a non-technical, non-developer, I couldn't just pick up the code and keep building. So I switched into project manager mode. Check-ins, deadlines, resets, again and again. And all the while, I really liked them. They were good people, and that just made it harder. So then came the breaking point. A long weekend hike in the beautiful Queen Charlotte Sound, and I had this sleepless night fending off a ton of possums in my tiny little tent. I was absolutely dead tired. I dragged myself back to Picton. The tank was empty, patience was gone. And so over lunch, I pulled out my phone, opened Slack, and finally typed the message I'd been avoiding. The outputs we agreed haven't been met. Please stop all work in progress and prepare a handover plan. Let's set a call this week to work it through. Having that conversation enabled a respectful closing of that chapter and kickstarted the engagement with the second team of developers. And it also meant that when I inevitably had to have a similar conversation with them, I was a little bit more prepared, and I had it sooner. Thankfully, in 2023, some trusted contacts in Australia connected me with a team in Hungary who could complete the work, and they've exceeded every expectation. I launched the app and web app in 2024, so that part of the story does have a happy ending. Of course, though, changing dev teams had a huge impact on time and cost. And with repeated lockdowns hitting my income, and therefore funding for Hold Mine, holding onto that bootstrap principle was tough. I questioned my principles, and I spent a lot of time rage hiking just to keep my sanity. And in those tough moments, I had to keep really connected with the purpose and problem I wanted to solve, so I could keep finding the energy and the capital to keep going. My advisory board helped top up the motivation when it got low, and as did an amazing cohort of friends and professional contacts. And when you're the sole founder, you need the right people around you. They really did give me the courage to keep going. And I needed it, because in the middle of that messy build phase, figuring out which developers to work with, no end in sight on when I'm going to be able to launch my app, something happened that changed everything. And it's almost exactly 3 years ago that this happened. I woke at 5 a.m. and something just felt wrong. Like 100 fluttering butterflies right in the center of my chest. And as someone who takes heart health really seriously, I knew my heart health was good, but I knew something wasn't right. A long, long wait for an ambulance, a normal ECG, and all other tests meant I just got on with my day. Then came a call at lunchtime after the blood tests were in. Get to A&E now, there's a cardiac team waiting for you, do not drive yourself. So I'd had a heart attack. Not the usual kind, mind you, a very special kind, a rare kind. It's called a SCAD, spontaneous coronary artery dissection, where the artery just splits. Blood pools between 2 of the layers in your artery, it bubbles up into a hematoma, blocks your artery, et voila, heart attack. Only 1% of heart attacks are like this, and of that 1%, 80% happen to women. Women that are, like me, fit and healthy and living life to the full. So you might think I'd spend the next few days sitting in the cardiac ward here at Christchurch Public feeling scared or full of regrets, but I didn't. I looked back feeling grateful that I'd taken the chances. I'd said yes to all of the weird and wonderful things that life threw at me. I told the people I loved how much I loved them, how much they meant to me, and I'd had those hard conversations. I even had a will in place, and I'd had the conversation with my executors. And I reflected at that time and realised for me, startup success isn't measured by speed or scale, it's measured by whether you stay true to what you believe in. As Anita Roddick reminded us, to succeed, you have to believe in something with such passion that it becomes a reality. As Richard Branson would say, you don't learn to walk by following rules. You learn by doing and by falling over. And as my dad would say, back yourself. So as well as that wisdom from my board, I'd like to leave you with this. Please have that conversation you're avoiding. Plan ahead, have a will. Things can change on a dime. Hold on to your vision and live your truth. And whatever you do, don't die wondering. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you do have any questions for Melissa or Sasha, then you can put them in the, as we talked through before, in the app. Weird one, because it's not technical, it's about your heart attack. Yours is 1% of what normal heart attacks have, so obviously the advice there is try and have heart attacks that are more normal. But I wonder, what was your thought process when they said all the scans and everything checks out, the ECG's fine, off you go, when you know in your body something's not right?
Yeah, I think the main thing I thought is that they had the wrong data. I just assumed that something wasn't right and it would show up eventually, and it did. So thankfully, all of the tests they ran, eventually one test showed the data. Yeah. But I think actually the key point there is not to have a regular heart attack, it's to be a woman in healthcare and advocate for yourself, because a lot of the research on heart attacks is on a male population. So make sure you know your body and advocate for yourself.
Give a second opinion or look for a second opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. And any questions, as I said, you can put them in the app there. How do you start those difficult conversations? That's my question. I can barely get my kids to sit at the dinner table, let alone when I do bring up anything awkward, you know, the screen time or the dangers of being online, they roll their eyes and they go, Dad, how do you bring up, you know, the fact that you need to have that difficult conversation?
In my experience, a lot of people prefer to have conversations that are not face-to-face, because then they're less confronting. And so you've probably heard the easiest way to have a conversation with a teenager is to sit them in the car next to you. And so I think we actually as adults don't grow out of that. It's tough to have these conversations. And so walking side by side, being in a car, but also letting people know that it's coming. And if there's a softer way to introduce that you'd like to have that conversation is really important.
A captive audience. Yeah, the car is a great solution, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sasha, what were the people around you, and maybe even a little voice in your head saying when you were turning down good money from people because, in principle, it didn't align with your values? Jump up to the mic there.
I mentioned Nora Batty, and she really is the voice in my head, and I sound a bit mad. And my mum was in my head quite a lot, turning away from a really well-paying exec role. But also remembering my dad's face and him not moving through this debt situation and all the stories I heard. It kind of felt like I didn't have a choice and that I'd rather try and fail, and it's a little bit cliche, but it really is the truth. I'd rather try and fail and somebody could look at it and argue and say I'd done a terrible job, because by it failing, then maybe somebody would try again and it would be successful.
Making a start. Another one for you, Sasha. What changes have you had to make during the last few years, and what would you do differently?
Well, I started with a co-founder. I don't have a co-founder anymore. The co-founder might have been a man from banking. So that's a big change, and I think that when I started this journey, I didn't think I could do it alone. I'd got a really strong sense that, especially in financial services, it's lots of blue suits. I've always looked a bit odd. I've always looked a bit like this. I talk about stories and bubbles and rainbows, even though I'm an accountant. So that's one of the changes that I have made, is to be really clear that it is my vision and to not be afraid to own that. And the second change is that I've had to let go of some of those quite purist views around what lending needs to look like for the future, because humans are used to being treated a particular way, and to completely change lending and put it on its head is difficult for people to swallow, not just investors. So letting go of some of those quite purist views to keep focused on the future instead.
One for you, Melissa. Thanks for these questions, by the way, team. How does Hold Mine help with those difficult conversations?
Yeah, I didn't want this to seem like a sales pitch. So it's a digital platform where you can put information in there. So someone could record their end-of-life wishes or a copy of their will, and then give you access to it. So if you don't want to have a face-to-face dialogue, but you want to share information, you can do that. And then it gives you grounds to be able to have a more informed conversation when they're ready.
And while you're there, a bit of a curly one here. Asking about your selection process for the New Zealand development teams that didn't work out. This person's personal experience of New Zealand development teams is vastly different, they say.
So I think I was probably naively enthusiastic at the start, and had some referrals and recommendations, and did a few reference checks, and thought this team were the right ones to work with. But I think as I've built capability in the development space, I realised that their way of working wasn't aligned with mine, and they were used to working on larger, well-funded products that didn't build an MVP. They just had a 3-year build cycle and high investment, whereas I had sort of that real rough and ready, get to market fast, test quickly, iterate post-launch, and they were not aligned. And I didn't factor that into my thinking at the start. So I don't doubt they're a great company to work with if you were aligned with what they were trying to deliver.
Great answer, insightful. Sasha, how would you recommend people get over the fear of admitting financial problems, ask for help? Do we need to educate kids for financial responsibility? I guess that answer is yes, but the first part you might like to answer.
I wrote this weird thesis that was on entrepreneurial storytelling. I promise it's related to the question.
You go for it.
And one of the findings of that thesis was that entrepreneurs sometimes stop because they don't hear the stories of failure or vulnerability. And I think that applies with stories around our financial situations as well. It's really difficult to talk about the challenges of our financial situation, but we're one of the most over-indebted countries in the OECD, so most of us are in it. So I think that what I would suggest is having those difficult conversations. I'm not sure about in the car talking about debt, but maybe over a glass of wine. Having those conversations about the reality of your situation, sharing with as vulnerably as possible. And with the kids, I've got 3 boys, 17, 11 and 8. The 17-year-old question was mine, the drain layer. Yep. Yeah, so I've sent those screens, thank you very much. And I think don't underestimate what your kids are learning from you and how you behave. I didn't think I'd taught my 17-year-old anything about money, to be honest. But he's got his own bank account now, and he told me last week that he doesn't let his bank account go below $400. I don't know how he's decided that. And then he told me about the 5 bank accounts that he's got. I never taught him that. I never told him about that, but that's something that he's picked up by osmosis. So don't be afraid of having the conversation, or underestimate how much people will be listening to you anyway.
And while you're there, how will you know when money sweet spot is making a difference here in Aotearoa, do you think? Do you have something, or have you had a moment?
So one of the ways that we're different at Money Sweet Spot is we capture the stories at the start around what's your motivation for getting out of debt. And then the journey includes goals that people set throughout the time. So I know we've already made a difference from the stories that people have told us. We had a customer 3 days ago, 75-year-old lady, who had been in debt for her entire life, 2 marriages, a medical event, 9 grandkids. And her goal for getting out of debt at 75 was that she got 9 grandkids, and they're all getting married in the next 3 years. And she wanted to be able to save $2,000 for each grandkid. But when she's paying 32% interest on the debt that she's got, makes that journey really difficult. So how I know that we're making a difference is that the stories already get told with us. So we might not be changing the world, but we have helped to support people to change their world already.
And sort of to wrap up, I'll ask you, what's the sort of, both of you, what's the best, or I suppose the most wonderful feedback that you've had from what you have done from your apps?
That lady last week, she sent through, her little wee motivation thing, and then yesterday she sent a one-pager, and she said that she couldn't imagine her life and being able to provide for her grandchildren without Money Sweet Spot, and she'd never felt supported, and she'd always been turned down, and she'd always been judged because of her circumstances. So I think that that's the most powerful story for me, when we can help people to imagine a future that they couldn't imagine for themselves.
What about you, Melissa?
Interestingly, mine also involves a little old lady. I got a phone call from a lady looking at evaluating whether she should use Holdmine. She'd had a call with NetSafe, and they'd given her a checklist of questions. And so she rang me, and when I answered, she said, "Oh, goody, you've ticked the first box." A real person answered the phone. And then I spent nearly an hour on the phone with her. And the reason she was looking at something like this is she knew that her health was declining, and she was really worried about the burden she would leave on her 3 adult daughters. And she knew one of her daughters would be hyper-responsible and take on the burden of managing her estate, and she didn't want to leave that for her. So when she saw Holdmine as a way to actually tidy things up, she was really excited. So she used the platform and then phoned me back 3 months later and said she'd talked her kids through her wishes and she had peace. And so for me, similar to Sasha, I don't care about saving the world. I care about making life better for one person. And if that happens multiple times, that's awesome.
Well, all the best to both of you. You're quite incredible. Sasha Lockley and Melissa Davies, ladies and gentlemen. Give them a round of applause. I would do a recap, but it seems a bit mean. The world's least likely accountant, Sasha, was up first, doing the double Ds, talking about death and dying. I thought, settle in, everyone. She talked about her matrix moment, how she's from Stafford, and the hard times for her parents, and her own breakdown, of course, all caused by that devil called debt. And so she said, "I was pissed off." And then she said, "Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear." And then she said it again. "I was pissed off." I thought, he seems to be breaking the rules right in front of us. Obviously a demonstration of breaking the rules. Most of us are in debt, which was great, wasn't it? That really lifted the room. And she apparently got rid of her co-founder, who was a banker, which, of course, as you know, is rhyming slang. And launched Money Sweet Spot, and only by accepting financial support from the right places to get it underway. She asked the question, what rules would you break to do the right thing? And I quite often break the rules. If I'm playing my kids at any board game and they appear to be winning, I will change the rules so that I win. And you might say, well, that's not the right thing. Yes, it is. It's teaching them life is unfair. Yeah? It's good for my kids to be out armed with that. What are you building? Who are you building for? Garden shed, lawnmower. It's got lots of families out of debt, which is a wonderful thing. And then, of course, that AI joke that we got, the dad joke. What do you get when you build a business with just your head? And the answer, of course, a sore head. Lead with heart and empathy. Well done, Sasha Lockley. Give her a round of applause. Great stuff. What is the hardest conversation? That was Melissa's opening. Obviously, does my bum look big in this? But you need to have them. I feel very lucky, actually, Melissa, that my family has sort of read your playbook, if you like, and my mum and dad did have that conversation, and I'm a big advocate of having a will. If you haven't got a will yet, go get one, because you're doing a wonderful thing for your loved ones. Anyway, talked about her dad passing away and being executor of that, and that is not, I've really felt for you there, that is a tough thing to do, especially when those conversations haven't been had. You flipped the script when you launched your Holdmine, not technical minded, doing it solo, doing it bootstrapped, and it was amazing. Hindsight is 2020. Wasn't that a great year? 2020. Oh boy, there are some people that did like the COVID years, and they're people I like to call mask pretty. Like for some reason when they put a mask on, they just look a lot better. It's like they're like, they're a 6, a 6, a 6. Hello, 9. You know, I don't know, it's just masks pretty. They're very keen to go back to wearing masks again. A small minority, but they're very keen on it. Anyway, she wanted to make it New Zealand made. That was getting hard to do. We heard about the deadlines going past, how tired she was, and to deal with that exhaustion, she went for a hike in the Marlborough Sounds. What's wrong with you? The possums made her so angry she fired her team. I'm not sure if that's the real story, but that's kind of what I got out of it. Anyway, Hold Mine launched. It was a great story, and that quite horrifying story about your heart attack. We'll all just make a little note of SCAD in our diaries if it ever happens to us. So give Melissa a round of applause as well. Thank you, Melissa. Great presentation.